Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Middleware Technologies. Today we are going to see how to set up a refresh-only replicated OpenLDAP server using syncreplica. So basically in this video, we are going to set up the replication service in OpenLDAP using two servers. One is going to be the master server and the other is going to be the replication server. So we are going to implement the producer consumer model configuration in this video. So I already have two servers, that is Scratch and Replica. These are the two servers that we are going to use for this video. Let us try to understand what is producer consumer architecture. So as you can see in this architecture diagram, there are two servers. One is producer server at the bottom and the other one is the consumer server. So we are trying to implement the replication service wherein the producer server, which is having the authoritative copy of the LDAP directory tree, is going to be replicated to the consumer server. So there are two ways in which the replication can happen. One is refresh only, the other one is refresh and persist. So in this video, we are going to concentrate on the refresh only mode, which is more popular in a very highly distributed environment of OpenLDAP. So as you can see from the request, so this is the client. We can think of this client as the LDAP client, which tries to connect to this producer consumer servers. So let us say a client has requested for a modify request into the LDAP directory tree for an entry. So that update request goes to the read-only server, that is consumer server. The consumer server sends back a referral mentioning the actual server that is supposed to do the modify request. So this is the response that the client gets whenever an update request is sent to the consumer server. So this referral mentions the URL or the information about the provider, that is producer server. So the client takes that information and sends a new request, that is the request number 3 for the modify request, and that modify request is executed on the producer server and the response is sent back to the client. So basically in a replicated service environment, it is only the master server or the producer server that does the addition, modification or deletion of any entries in the LDAP directory tree. So the write operations are only carried out in the producer server. Only the read operations are carried out by the consumer server. This is required in order to maintain consistency of the data which is getting modified. Otherwise, if both the servers are allowed to modify the LDAP directory tree, there may be inconsistencies in the data that is present in the directory server. So that is the whole thing about the producer consumer architecture. Let us try to go into the details of the implementation of this replication service. So as a first step, what we are going to do is we are going to download and extract the OpenLDAP package on the master server. So these are the steps that we are going to follow on the master server. Let me copy this one and go to the master server. So this is Scratch, that is a master server on which we are installing the dependencies, that is make and GCC, which is required for build and compilation of OpenLDAP package. So they are already installed on my machine. Now let us go and fetch the package. This package is already available on my machine, but you can just do a duplicate on this zip file in order to download that package. Once that is downloaded, you can extract the package using the tar command as follows. Once the extraction is completed, the next step, that is step 2, is building and installing the OpenLDAP server on the master server. So let me go down a bit. So here, one thing to note, on the master server, we need to implement the replication service to make it as a producer server. So for that, we need to configure our server with the following overlay, which we need to enable. So once the package is extracted, you can go into the OpenLDAP directory with that version and do the configuration for that package. So here, like I am running this configure script to enable the overlay feature. Once the configuration is done, you will get a last statement, that is, please run make depend. So we are going to run that one. This is going to build the dependencies for us. Once that is done, we need to actually build the OpenLDAP package now. So we can do make. So this is the step that we are executing now. Once the build is completed, we need to run make install using sudo. This will install the OpenLDAP package on our master server, that is the producer LDAP server. With this, like our installation is completed on the master server with the overlay feature enabled, so that the master server can act as the producer LDAP server. Let me clear my screen and go to the documentation. Now let us go into our next step, that is step 3. That is update slapd.conf file on the master server. So here, I'm going to use the default file that is available at the following location. You can just look at this following location, copy it into your home directory or wherever you want to update that file. So this is the file that we are going to use, and we are going to update it to enable the sync provider overlay in that. So as you can see, the functionality of the master server is implemented in an overlay called sync provider. So that is the feature or the overlay that we have already enabled, but we need to do the configuration for that sync provider overlay directives in the slapd.conf file. The sync replica running requires configuration on both the master and the replica server or the shadow server you can say. So we need to configure both the master server and the replica server with the required configuration for enabling the sync replica service. The configuration directives that we will touch for this configuration is going to be the backend sections or the database sections of the slapd.conf file. The most important attributes that play a very important role in the OpenLDAP sync replication service is the entry CSN and the entry UUID. So entry CSN is basically entries change sequence number. So whenever entry gets modified, the change sequence number gets updated with the latest timestamp. So it is basically a timestamp which gets updated whenever an entry is modified. So this is a very important attribute that needs to be taken into consideration when we are implementing the replication service. The other one is entry UUID. So this is basically a unique ID that is provided to each entry that is available in the directory tree. So the sync replication process which happens between the producer and consumer server, they utilize these two attributes for the replication service. So now let us see the configuration that we are going to do on the on the master server. So this is the file that I have already updated. So I'm going to show you like the important sections which we need to take note of. If we go to the first line, so this is all the default configuration that we get for the schemas that are included, the PID file, the argument file location, the modules that we are going to load, and the database config. So this is all same. The thing that we are going to modify is the backend database, that is the MDB database. So here, like we are building a directory tree for stack.conf. We are providing this root dn, which is cn is equal to manager with the root password secret, and this is the directory which holds the database files. And these are the indexes that we are using for the entries which we are adding into the directory tree. The important indexes that we need to add for the sync provider implementation are these two. So the LDAP sync replication protocol uses these two indexes to check the equality. So we need to add this index directive for those two attributes. And here, like I'm giving a very relaxed access, basically for everybody, all access you can say, but this is only for reference purpose, because I'm not concentrating more on the access control list for this video. We are more interested in looking at how the replication process happens and is configured on the server. So access can be like this is very relaxed one, but you can just modify it accordingly for your production environment. Now let us go to the overlay section. Like here, once the overlay module is enabled or enabled during the configuration, like we need to add this directive, that is overlay sync provider, and we need to provide these two directives. Basically these are optional, but this checkpoint is basically a way to create a snapshot, or let's say like if the OpenLDAP directory has done some write operations, and there are some write operations that have been carried out, like let's say 50 write operations, and or it has passed 10 minutes, so it needs to write those modifications to the database. So basically, like everything that is in the memory that needs to be written into the database file. So that is where the checkpoint comes into picture. And session log, sync provider session log is basically holding 100 transactions or 100 changes, we can say in this case, in memory, which are then further sent as in the transition to the replication server. So these are the two directives that are used for that purpose. And this is last one, database monitor, that we are going to configure as usual in the default configuration. So this is the basic configuration wherein we need to touch the backend database and add these indexes and the overlay configuration on the master server in order to enable the producer configuration. Let me close this file and clear my screen. Let us go into my documentation, and this is the file we have already looked at. So we'll go to the next step, that is ensuring the configuration file can be passed using the slapd test. So this is the utility that we are going to use in order to verify our configuration file that we are going to use for producer server. Currently, this step is failing because there is no database already available on the server. So what we'll do is we will try to do the slap test using the following command, which will load the configuration database into the following location. So let us try to run this one. We need to run this with sudo. So now the config file is tested successfully, and if you go into this location, the config files is loaded. You can just verify. So you can see the config file for the configuration database has been loaded into the following location. Now let us go into our next step, that is importing the LDIF data on the master server. So this is basic data file that we are LDIF directory tree that we are trying to load into the LDAP directory server on the master server. And here I'm using these entries. So basically I am creating this organization, users group, OU groups, and system. So these are the three organization units that we are creating, and we are adding these entries for the users. So this is one user entry, and this is the other user entry that we are adding to the directory tree with this LDIF file. And this is the LDAP admin group that we are creating, and we are adding a special account, that is syncreplica. This is important. This is the account or the user system ID that we are going to use for replicating connecting to the master server from the replica server. And this is another system account that we are adding just for reference purpose. So this is the LDIF directory data that we are going to add. So let me go to the step where we can validate the LDIF file first. So we are going to run this command, wherein we are using the slapd command with -u and -c options, which will run it in the dry run mode. And this is our database directory configuration location, and this is the LDIF data file that we are going to do a dry run on. So as you can see, it will add the following entries into the LDAP directory tree. Now let us run the same command without these two options, and this is going to create our entries in the directory tree. Now, so we have loaded our directory data. Now let us go into our next step, that is step 5, starting the LDAP service on the master server. So here, I'm going to use the slapd daemon to start up the service with the following option, that is the location containing the LDAP configuration database. So you can just verify with the process whether it is up and running. So that has started the LDAP server on the master server. You can just validate the entries by using the LDAP search. So here I am doing LDAP search with simple authentication by providing the following DN, like a bind DN, and this is the base of the directory that we are going to search in, and we are trying to search for UID mat, the entry which contains UID mat. So let us try to search and provide the password for mat, and you can see the entry has been fetched from the directory tree. So our server is working fine, the master server, and it has been enabled with the sync provider overlay. So with this, our configuration for the master server is completed. Now let us go to the configuration for the replica server. So for that, we are going to work on the replica server. So in this step, we are going to do the same steps: download and extract the OpenLDAP on the replica. So here also we are going to install the dependency packages, that is make and gcc. So this is already installed on my machine, and you can just go and download this file, that is the package, and extract it. These steps are already done on my machine, and you can just go into the directory where it is extracted and try to build and configure, build and install the package. So we are just going to run the configure on the replica server without any options. So my configuration is done. The next step that we need to run is make depend. So basically building the dependencies. And now we can build our actual LDAP package, that is OpenLDAP package. Now once the package has been built, it's time to install using make install, run it with sudo. Now the OpenLDAP package has been installed on the replica server. So let me clear my screen and go to the documentation. The next step that we are going to do is step 9, update the slapd.conf file on the replica server. So here, what we need to do is we need to actually configure the syncreplica directory in the slapd.conf file. So here also, we are going to use the same slapd.conf.default configuration file that is available at the following location. The important things that we need to note on this configuration is the schema files that we load on the master server must be the same as on the shadow server, too, and the suffix should be the same on the master and the replica server. And there is no need of root dn because we are going to use the replica server to fetch the data from the master server, and we are not going to use the replica server for doing any modification to the entries. So there is no requirement for root dn in this configuration. And we also need to ensure that the object class entry cn and the UUID are all indexed as they are the required or the most important parameters for the replication to work. So these are the 4 points that we need to take into consideration before we update the slapd.conf file. The replica server is basically acts like a LDAP client, so it is one other user or a client that we use to connect to the server. So here the replica server binds to the master server and performs a special LDAP operation that is called the LDAP synchronization operation. So that is one thing to note. The configuration of replica server has to do with providing information about how the replica server should bind to the master server. So basically the configuration that we are going to do on the replica server has information about the master server, basically what is the master server FQDN, and how we can connect to the master server, basically the authentication credentials, that is bind DN and password, and what type of replication service we want to implement, basically refresh only or refresh and persist. So that kind of information we need to configure in the slapd.configuration file on the replica server. So we'll have a look at it in this configuration file that I have already updated. So let me go into that file and show you what exactly we need to take into consideration. So this is the schemas, the PID and argument file, the modules that we are load, this is all in the same. The thing that we are configuring or updating is the backend database section. And here you can see we have the suffix same, we have the root DN, but there is no root password because there is no need for root password, as this is required for any write operations or modify operations. And the indexes are all same, and this is the important index that we need to make sure that is available on the replica server also. And the access ACLs that we are relaxing it to all with all access. And the syncreplica directive that we need to add on the replica server is this thing, wherein RID is basically a sequence number that we provide to the replica server. This is a 3-digit sequence number that we provide for the mentioning the primary master server ID. So this is going to be 001. And the provider URL is this, wherein we have the provider available on the scratch, and the type of replication that we want to implement is refresh only. And the interval at which the replication server is going to fetch the data from the master server or the producer server is at every 5 seconds. And the search ways that we are going to replicate the data from the master server to the replication server is the base directory, that is DC is equal to stack and DC is equal to com. And the bind DNI credential that we are going to use this for this replica server to connect to the provider server or the master server is this UID. So this is all you need to configure for sync replication. And let's say like if there is anybody is trying to do a modify operation by connecting to the consumer server, there must be some way for the replica server to notify the client that this server is not a master server wherein we can update the update the entries. So it needs to refer to the correct or the appropriate server which can do that operation. So this is the directory that is required in order to redirect or direct the client to use the correct server for modify operations. And this is database monitor, the configuration that we want to add by default. So this is all that we need to add or update in our slapd.configuration file on the replica server to enable the replication, the consumer service. So let me close this file and clear my screen. Now let us go into our documentation. So we have already looked at this slapd.configuration file on the replica server. So we are going to just import that configuration on the replica server. So before that, we need to ensure that the following slapd configuration database location is available, and the directory to hold the database files is also available. So this is the directory wherein our data files will be stored. And let us provide with this let us provide the following permissions for the data directory. So basically this is required in order to make sure that slapd daemon is able to read from this following data directory, and it is able to update it whenever the sync replication happens. Now let us go into our next step, that is step 10, that is importing the configuration database on the replica server. So here we are going to use this slap test in order to import the configuration. So as you can see, like we are using this directory, configuration directory location, wherein we are going to load our slave configuration. So the configuration file has been tested successfully and it is updated in the location. Now it is time to start up the LDAP service on the Replica server. So here, like, we will again use the slapd daemon in order to start the LDAP service on the Replica server, and you can just ensure that the slapd service is up and running. Let me clear my screen, and now let us go into our next step, that is step 12, validate the synchronized data directory. So here, first we will look at the LDAP directory that is available on the master server. So let me go onto the master server and do ls-ltr in the following location. See, here you can see this is the data files that we have on the master server, and now let us try to see the same location that we have configured on the Replica server, and it should be synchronized. So as you can see, the data is synchronized from the master server to the Replica server. The next thing that we are going to do is modify LDAP data. So what we will do is we will create this LDIF file, modify LDIF file on the Replica server. So here what we are doing is we are going to take this distinguished name or entry, and we are trying to apply a modify to replace the description with the following description value. So let us try to update or modify that using the LDAP modify utility. So as you can see, like, I'm trying to do a LDAP modify operation on the Replica server with the simple bind, wherein the bind DN and bind password is going to be the user ID Matt and his password, and we are trying to apply this modification using the following file, LDIF file. And let me give the password for Matt, and you can see it is not able to modify, and it has given a referral which is the actual server that can modify that entry, that is Scratch. That is our primary server. So now let us go into our primary server. Let me clear my screen, and here, like, what we are going to do is we are going to do the same operation, LDAP modify, on the master server, or you can do it on the Replica server also, but providing the, so you can do that same operation on the Replica server, but we need to connect the LDAP modify client to the host on which the master server is available. So this is the host on which the master server or the producer service is running. So we are trying to connect to that, and we are trying to do the same operation, that is modifying the description of the UID Matt entry. Let me give the password for Matt, and you can see the modified entry has been completed successfully. So now if you go into this master server, let us now try to validate the modified entry. So what we'll do is, so first let us go into the Replica server, and let me clear my screen. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to do a search for that entry with UID Matt and try to get the description value from that entry. So we'll try to see, like, if that has been updated or not. Let me give the correct password. So it is still not updated. As you can see, the entry description is still the old description. But if we do the same operation on the master server, you can see the description has been updated. So so the replication should happen within few seconds as per the interval that we have provided, and the entry should be updated in the replica server also. So let us give it some time. Now let us run the same LDAP search command on the replica server, and you can see the description has been updated on the replica server. So right now, like, the replica server is updated with the copy on the master server, and we are able to fetch the accurate detail of the LDAP entry which has been modified on the master server. So this is how the replication works in the OpenLDAP directory, and we have only seen one method, that is refresh only, wherein the replica server will try to poll the producer server or the master server for any modifications, and it will try to fetch those entries from the master server, and it will update it in the replication server. So this is how, like, we can implement the OpenLDAP replication service using the syncreplica engine in the OpenLDAP software platform. So this is the same operation that we have done on the UScratch and Replica. So that is all I wanted to show you in this video, like how we can work with syncreplication on the OpenLDAP. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thank you all. Thanks for watching this video, and you guys have a great day. Also, please note that whatever documentation that I am showing in this video is already available on the blog, and the blog link description is going to be shared in the video description. So you can just follow for that blog, in that blog, for the code details. Thank you.